This is a reading from the Mystical City of God, the Coronation by Venerable Mary of Agreda. This is the second part of chapter 15 from volume 4. I'll read one sentence to overlap. Of all this, the angels avail themselves as serviceable arms in our defense against the demon. For with each good action we rob the devils of some of the right acquired over us by original sin, and still more by actual sin. 289. As soon as man enters into the use of his reason, the battle between the demons and the angels becomes still more bitter. For whenever we commit some sin, the dragon exerts all his powers to deprive us of our lives before we have time to do penance, and thus to seal our eternal damnation. In order that we may commit new crimes, he besets all our ways with slings and dangers peculiar to each one's state of life. And he overlooks none of us, although he does not tempt one as dangerously as the other. But if men would see into these secret workings of the demons just as they happen, and if they would perceive the traps and pitfalls which of their own fault they permit the demon to prepare for them, all would live in trembling and fear. Many would change their state of life, or would refuse to enter upon it. Others would forsake the positions, offices, and dignities which they now esteem so highly. But in ignorance of their risk, they live on in pernicious security. They do not know enough to understand or believe more than is evident to their senses, and therefore they do not fear the hellish traps and pitfalls set for their ruin. Hence the number of fools is so great, and that of the truly prudent and wise so small. Many are called, and few are chosen. The wicked and the sinners are countless, while the virtuous and the perfect are very scarce. In proportion as anyone multiplies his sins, in that proportion the devil acquires positive rights over his soul. And if he cannot put an end to the life of his victim, he at least seeks to treat him as his vile slave. For he claims that each day this soul becomes more his own, and that of its own will it so chooses, that therefore it cannot justly be snatched from his hands, nor deserve the assistance which it will not accept, that the merits of Christ should not be applied to it when it spurns them, that it should not benefit from the intercession of the saints when it entirely forgets them. 290. By these and other pretenses, which cannot be all mentioned here, the devil tries to cut short the time of penance for those whom he claims as his own. If he does not succeed in this, he tries to block the way of their justification, and his attempts are successful with many souls. But the protection of God and of the holy angels is wanting to none of us, and thus we are delivered from dangers of death by innumerable ways, and this is so certain that there is scarcely anyone who could not verify it in the course of his life. They furnish us with ceaseless inspirations and warnings. They make us of all occasions and means available for our admonishment and exhortation. What is still more valuable, they defend us against the rabid fury of the demons, and set in motion against them all that the intellect of an angel or of a blessed spirit can devise, and all that their power and their most ardent charity can command for our safety. All this is necessary many times for some souls, and at times for all the souls who have delivered themselves over to the jurisdiction of the demons, and who use their liberty and their faculties only for such temerity. I do not speak of the pagans, the idolaters, and heretics. These, indeed, the angels likewise defend and inspire to the practice of the moral virtues which they afterwards use as arguments against the devils. But ordinarily, the most they do for them is to protect their lives in order that God, having allowed them so much time for their conversion, may be justified in his behavior toward them. The angels also labor to prevent them from committing such great sins as the demons incite them to, for the charity of the angels exerts itself so that at least they may not incur such great punishments as the malice of the demons seeks to fasten upon them. 291. Within the mystical communion of the Church, however, are fought the hardest battles between the angels and the demons, according to the different state of souls. All its members they commonly defend with the ordinary weapons furnished them by the sacramental character impressed upon the soul in baptism, by grace, by virtues, by the performance of good and meritorious works, by devotions to the saints, by the prayers of the just, and by all the good movements Catholics may have during their life. This defense of the just is most powerful, for since they are in grace and friendship of God, the angels obtain a greater right against the demons, and thus they rout them by showing up the holiness and perfection of these souls, which are so formidable to the powers of hell, and therefore this by itself ought to cause us to esteem grace beyond all creation. There are other lukewarm and imperfect souls who fall into sin and occasionally rise again. Against these the demon obtain more power to persecute them with their cruelty. But the holy angels strenuously exert themselves in their defense, so that, as Isaiah tells us, Isaiah chapter 42, verse 3, the broken reed may not be crushed, and the smoking flax be not entirely extinguished. 292. There are other souls so unhappy and depraved that during their whole life after their baptism they have not performed one good work, or if they have ever risen from sin, they have returned to it with such eagerness that they seem to have renounced their God, living and acting as if they had no hope of another life, no fear of hell, no repentance for any of their sins. In these souls there is no vitality of grace, no attempt at true virtue, nor have the holy angels any good or available ground for their defense. The demons cry out, "This soul at least is altogether ours, subject to our commands, and has no part in grace." They point out to the good angels all the sins, wickedness, and vices of such souls, which of their own free will serve such evil masters. What then passes between the angels and the demons is incredible and indescribable, because the demons exert all their fury to prevent such souls from receiving inspirations and helps. As they cannot resist the divine power, they seek at least with all their power to hinder them from attending or yielding to the call of heaven. With such souls, ordinarily, it happens that whenever God himself or through his holy angels sends them a holy inspiration or movement, these demons must first be put to flight and the soul snatched from their midst, lest these birds of prey immediately pounce upon and destroy the holy seed. This defense the angels usually conduct with the words which I have quoted above. Who is like unto God that dwells on high? Who like Christ at the right hand of the eternal Father? Who is like to the most holy Mary? Together with other sayings, before which the infernal dragons take flight. Sometimes they are thereby hurled back into hell, although not abating in their fury, they again return to the conflict. 293. The hellish foes also strive with all their force to induce men to multiply their sins, in order that the measure of their sins may be so much the sooner be complete, and their time of penance and of life may come to an end. For then the demons would be enabled to carry them off to eternal torments. But the angels, who are rejoiced by the repentance of sinners, Luke chapter 8, verse 12, even though they may not be able to bring them to repentance, labor diligently to do away with occasions of sin, and to lessen the number of sins or prevent them altogether. And when, with all their efforts unknown to mortals, they cannot bring back the souls from sin, they resort to the intercession of the most holy Mother of God, asking her to be their mediatrix with the Lord and lend her aid in confounding the demons. In order to move her merciful kindness the sooner, they induce the souls of sinners to practice some special devotion or perform some service in honor of the great lady. Although it is true that all good works performed in the state of sin are dead and very weak weapons against the devil, yet they always retain some remote appropriateness on account of the good end in view, and thus the sinner is less indisposed towards grace than without them. Moreover, these good works, when presented by the angels and especially by the Heavenly Mother, possess in the eyes of the Lord a certain life, or the resemblance of it, altogether different from that given to them by the sinners. And therefore, though he does not bind himself to respond to them, he nevertheless does it on account of the one so asking. 294. In these different ways, an infinite number of souls come out of their sinful ways and are snatched from the claws of the dragon. And as there are innumerable souls who fall into such a dreadful state that they need a powerful aid, the Most Holy Queen interposes hers whenever the angels fail in their defense. The demons are fiercely tormented by their own fury whenever they perceive any sinner calling upon or remembering his queen, since they know by experience how kindly she receives sinners and how readily she makes their cause her own. Without hope or spirit of resistance, the devils immediately give themselves up as foiled and vanquished. It often happens when God desires to bring about some special conversion that the great queen herself peremptorily commands the demons to withdraw from that soul and sink into the abyss, and her commands are always obeyed. At other times, without such peremptory orders, God permits them to see the mysteries, the power, and holiness of his mother, and this new knowledge, filling them with consternation and confusion, puts them to flight. If the souls respond and cooperate with the grace obtained for them by the Heavenly Sovereign, they are freed from the attacks of the demons. 295. Yet, though the intercession of the great Queen and her power is so formidable to the devils, and though the Most High confers no favor upon the Church or upon souls without her, there are nevertheless many occasions in which the humanity of the incarnate Word itself battles for us and defends us against Lucifer, declaring himself openly with his mother in our favor, and annihilating and vanquishing the demons. So great is his love for men and for all that pertains to their welfare, that this happens not only when the demons are made to feel directly the virtues of Christ and his merits through the operation of the sacraments in the souls, but also when, in other miraculous conversions, he fills them with particular knowledge of one or more mysteries to their confusion and rout. Of such a kind was the conversion of St. Paul, of Mary Magdalene, and other saints, or whenever it is necessary to protect some Catholic kingdom or the Church from the treachery and malice of hell for their destruction. On such occasions, not only his sacred humanity, but even the infinite divinity, armed with the omnipotence of the Father, advances upon the demoniacal hosts, filling them in the above-mentioned manner with the knowledge of the mysteries and of his omnipotence, by which he overwhelms them and forestalls them in their real or intended conquests. 296. Whenever the Lord thus interposes such powerful aid, the whole infernal reign of confusion is terrorized and stricken down into the hellish abysses for many days, giving forth howls of mournful despair and totally unable to move from their places until the Lord again gives them permission to rise. But as soon as they receive permission, they again issue forth with their former fury for the ruin of souls. Although it may not seem in harmony with their pride and arrogance to enter into a new contest with the one by whom they have been overthrown and vanquished, nevertheless, their jealous fear lest we come to the enjoyment of God and their furious desire to prevent it again prevail and urge them to continue their persecutions to the end of our lives. I was made to understand that if God were not so outrageously misused in his mercy, he would often interpose, even miraculously, his divine omnipotence in our behalf. Especially would he do this in defense of the mystical body of the Church and of some Catholic governments, bringing to naught the counsels of hell for the destruction of Christianity in our times. We do not merit this protection of the infinite power, because all are united in rousing the divine wrath, and the whole world has joined hands with the infernal fiends, into whose power it has fallen on account of the blind and insane pursuit of evil, rampant among men. 297. In the conversion of St. Paul, this assistance of the Most High is openly manifest, for he had set him apart even in the womb of his mother, and chosen him as an apostle and as a vase of election. Although his life before the persecution of the Church was a series of events which deceived the demons, just as he is deceived in many other souls, yet God watched him from the moment of his conception and regulated his natural character and the care of the angels in his defense and protection. Hence, the hatred of the devil and their desire of causing his death in the first years of his life increased. As they failed in this, and as they later saw him become a persecutor of the Church, they were solicitous to preserve his life. When the holy angels found themselves powerless to withdraw Paul from the error to which he had entirely dedicated himself, the powerful queen entered the combat and made his cause her own. Through her, Christ and the Eternal Father interposed his divine assistance and snatched him from the grasp of the dragon. In one instant, at the apparition of the Lord, all the demons that accompanied St. Paul on the way to Damascus were hurled to the abyss. 298. On that occasion, Lucifer and his cohorts felt the lash of the divine omnipotence. Filled with fear and consternation, they for some days lay lifeless in the depths of the infernal caverns. But as soon as the Lord took away from their minds the remembrance of the divine mysteries, they began to breathe forth new wrath. The great dragon called together the rest and spoke to them. How is it possible to rest, when every day I see new injuries heaped upon me by this incarnate Word, and by this woman who conceived and bore him as man? Where is my strength? Where is my power? And of what use is my fury, and the triumph which I gained over him among mortals, ever since God, without reason, cast me from the heavens to this abyss? It seems, my friends, that the Omnipotent intends to seal up the portals of these infernal regions and open up those of heaven, which would be the destruction of our reign, and of all my coveted designs to drag to these torments the rest of mankind. If God, besides having redeemed men, works for them such miracles, if he shows them such love and seeks to draw them to his friendship by such powerful works of his right hand, they will permit themselves to be overcome, even if they have the disposition of wild beasts and hearts of adamant. All will love and serve him if they are not more obstinate and rebellious than we ourselves. What soul can be so callous as not to be drawn to this God-man, who with such tender love seeks its eternal glory? Saul was our friend, a willing instrument of my designs, subject to my will and command, an enemy of the crucified, and I had destined him for the most cruel torments in hell. In the midst of all this, God suddenly snatches him from my hands, and by his divine power raises this insignificant creature of the earth to such high grace and favors that we, his enemies, are astounded. What has Paul done to deserve such an exceeding good fortune? Was he not in my service, offending his God? If God has been so liberal with him, what protection will he not lavish upon other, less grievous sinners? And even if he does not convert them by such great miracles, he will gain them through baptism and the other sacraments by which they can justify themselves day by day. This example of God's mighty defense of the church at the time when I attempted to destroy it through Saul will draw all the world to his service. Is it possible that I should see vile humankind raised to the grace and happiness which I have lost, and that it should occupy the heaven from which I have been hurled? This thought torments me more furiously than the fires of hell. I am filled with a powerless rage against myself for not being able to destroy myself in my wrath. Would that God himself would do it instead of preserving me in these torments. But since this is not to be, tell me, my vassals, what shall we do against this so powerful God? Him we cannot injure, but in those whom he loves so much we can avenge ourselves, because in them we can oppose his will. And since my majesty is most offended and incensed against this woman, our enemy, who gave him human being, I wish to inaugurate new ways of destroying her and avenging ourselves for having robbed us of Saul and cast us into these abysses. I shall not rest until I shall have vanquished her. For this purpose I resolve to execute all the plans formed against God and man after my fall from heaven. Come, all of you, to help me in my design and to execute my will. 299. Such were the words of exhortation addressed to the demons by Lucifer. Some of them answered, Our captain and leader, we are ready to obey thee, knowing how much this woman, our foe, oppresses and torments us. But it is possible that she by herself, without other aid, may resist us, despising all our efforts and attacks, as we have seen on other occasions, when she showed herself altogether our superior in strength. What she feels most is to see us attack the followers of her Son, because she loves them and is solicitous about them as a mother. Let us raise a general persecution against the faithful, for we have at our service the whole of Judaism, now incensed against the new church of the crucified. Through the priests and Pharisees, we may succeed in all our attempts against the faithful, and thus vent our wrath against this hostile woman. Lucifer approved of this counsel and showed favor to the demons who had given it. Thus agreed, they issued forth to destroy the church by the hands of others, just as they had attempted it through Saul. Thence resulted what I shall relate further on, and also the battle of the most holy Mary against the dragon and his hosts, wherein she gained such great victories for the holy church. To this battle I referred in the 6th chapter of the first part, and there stated that I had reserved it for this place. Of it I shall speak in the next chapter. Instruction which the great mistress of the angels gave me. 300. My daughter, by no power of human words wilt thou in this mortal life ever succeed in describing the envy of Lucifer and his demons against men, or the malice, astuteness, deceits, and ruses with which in his wrath he seeks to bring them into sin and later on to the eternal torments. He tries to hinder all good works, and such as are performed he tries to minimize or to destroy and pervert as to their merits. All the malice of which his own mind is capable, he attempts to inject into the souls. Against these attacks, God provides admirable protection, if men will only cooperate and correspond on their part. Hence, the apostle admonishes them to walk carefully amid all these dangers and conflicts, not like the foolish, but as wise, redeeming their time, because the days of mortal life are evil and full of dangers. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. Again, he exhorts them to be fixed and constant in good works, because their labor shall not be in vain before the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. The truth of this our enemy knows and dreads. Hence he seeks with deepest malice to cause dismay in the souls at the commission of one sin, in order that they may ruin themselves by despair and leave off all good works. For thus would they throw aside the weapon with which the angels can defend them and do battle with the demons. Although these works in the sinner have not the life of charity or of merit for grace or glory, yet they are very useful. Sometime it happens that on account of the habit of doing good, the divine clemency furnishes efficacious help for performing these works with greater fervor, or with sorrow for sins and true charity, by which the soul regains justification. 301. By all our good deeds as creatures, we open up ways to the blessed for defending us and for asking the divine mercy to look upon us and snatch us from sin. These saints also feel obliged to come to the assistance of those that sincerely invoke them in danger and that show them a special devotion. If the saints in their charity are so inclined to favor men in the dangerous conflicts with the devils, thou must not be surprised, my dearest, that I am so merciful with the sinners who take refuge in my clemency. For I desire their salvation infinitely more than they themselves. Innumerable are those whom I have saved from the infernal dragon because of their devotion to me, even though they have recited only one Ave, or have said only one word in my honor and invocation. So great is my love for them that if they would call upon me in time and with sincerity, none of them would perish. But the sinners and the reprobate do no such thing, because the wounds of sin, not being of the body, do not distress them, and the oftener they are committed, the less regret or sorrow do they cause. The second sin is already like wounding a dead body, which knows neither fear, nor defense, nor sensation. 302. The result of this torpid insensibility to eternal damnation and to the deceits of the devils in fastening it upon men is dreadful. Without knowing upon what they rest their false security, the sinners are asleep and perfectly at ease to their ruin, when they ought justly to fear and take heed of the swiftly approaching eternal death, or at least seek help by praying to the Lord, or to me, or the saints. But even this, which costs them so little, they do not know how to begin, until the time in which the condition of their salvation can be realized has, for many of them, passed away. If for some of them I still procure salvation in the last agony, this privilege cannot be common to all. Hence are lost so many children of the church, who in their ingratitude and foolishness despise the many and powerful helps given by the divine clemency in most opportune time. Therefore also it will increase their confusion, when they shall see that with the mercy of their God, my own kindest wishes to save them, and the charity of the saints before their eyes, They have robbed God of the glory of their conversion, and not afforded me or to the angels or saints the joy of saving them in answer to their heartfelt invocation. 303. I wish, my daughter, to manifest to thee still another secret. Thou already knowest that my Son and Lord in the Gospel says that the angels have joy in heaven whenever any sinner does penance and is converted to the way of life through his justification. Luke chapter 15, verse 10. The same happens when the just perform works of true virtue and merit new degrees of glory. Now, that which happens among the heavenly inhabitants in the conversion of sinners and in the increase of merit of the just has a counterpart in what happens to the demons at the sins of the just and the deeper falls of sinners. For no sin is committed by men, however small, in which the demons do not take pleasure. And those that attend to the business of tempting mortals immediately give notice to the demons in the eternal dungeons of their successes. There they enjoy them and record them for further use, both in order to press their claims before the divine judge, and in order that their greater dominion and jurisdiction over sinners according to the measure of the offense may be publicly known. In this manner they show their treacherous hate of men, whenever they succeed in deceiving them into sin by some momentary and apparent pleasure. But the Most High, who is just in all his works, ordained that also the conversion of sinners and the good works of the just should redound to the torment of the envious demons, since they rejoice so much at the perdition of man. 304. This sort of chastisement therefore causes great torments to all the demons, because by it they are not only confounded and oppressed in their mortal hatred of men, but by the victories of the saints and the conversion of sinners, they are deprived of a great part of their power over those whom they have drawn into sin by their plots. The new torments thus caused to them they seek to vent upon the damned in hell. And just as there is new joy in heaven at the penance and good works of sinners, so, for the same reason, there arise new confusion and misfortune in hell at the good works of the just. On such occasions, amid howls of despair, the demons inflict new accidental torments upon all that live in those dungeons of dismay and horror. Thus, heaven and hell are affected at the same time in contrary ways by the conversion and justification of the sinner. Whenever the souls justify themselves through the sacraments, especially by a truly sorrowful confession, it often happens that the devils, for a long time, dare not appear before the penitent, not for many hours, even presume to look at him, if he himself does not again encourage them by losing the divine favor and returning again to the dangers and occasions of sin. For then the demons quickly cast off the fear inspired by true penitence, and justification. 305. In heaven there can be no sorrow or pain. But if there could be, then the saints would feel it on account of nothing in the world so much as to see the justified souls falling back and losing grace, and the sinner drawing away further or making it impossible for him to regain divine favor. Sin of its own nature is just as powerful to move heaven to sorrow and pain as penance and virtue are to torment hell. Consider then, my dearest, in what dangerous ignorance mortals ordinarily live, depriving heaven of its joy in the justification of souls, hindering the external glory connected therewith, holding up the punishment due to the demons, and affording them, on the contrary, the joyful triumph of the fall and perdition of men. I desire that thou, as a faithful and prudent handmaid, be guided by thy higher knowledge, labor in compensating these evils. See that thou always approach the sacrament of confession with fervor, esteem, and veneration, and with a heartfelt sorrow for thy sins, for this sacrament inspires the dragon with great terror, and he exerts himself diligently to hinder souls by his deceits, in order to cause them to receive this sacrament lukewarmly, out of mere habit, without sorrow, and without proper disposition. He is so eager in this matter, not only because he wishes to cause the loss of souls, but also to avoid the fierce torments of being oppressed and confounded in his malignity by the true penance and justification of his escaped victims. 306. Besides all this, my friend, I wish to remind thee that although the infernal dragons are indeed the authors and masters of lies, and although they deal with men only in order to mislead and ruin them by their deceits, yet these enemies, whenever in their meetings they confer among themselves in regard to misleading men, are forced to admit certain truths which they know and cannot deny. They understand them, yet they communicate them to men not in good faith, but obscured and mixed with their own errors and falsehoods for the promotion of their own malicious designs. Since thou hast in this chapter and in the whole course of this history laid bare so many of their counsels, meetings, and secrets, they are highly enraged against thee, for they flattered themselves that these secrets and all their machinations would never come to the knowledge of men. Therefore they are furious to take vengeance upon thee, but the Most High will protect thee if thou call upon him to crush the head of the dragon. Do thou also beseech the divine clemency that these advices and instructions may help to undeceive mortals, and by the divine light redound to their benefit. On thy own part, do thou seek faithfully to correspond as being under greater obligation to him than all others living in the present age. For if, understanding their malice, thou dost not exert thyself to vanquish them with the assistance of the Most High and of his holy angels, thy ingratitude and the triumph of hell will grow in proportion to the favors thou hast received.